Hi there, I'm Alex and welcome back to Ukes with Alex, the ukulele channel where we dive headfirst into ukulele and ukulele culture, come up for air and try and absorb as much as we can along the way. And today I'm going to do a very brief video. There's going to be no fancy sound samples because I've done all of that quite a few times, but I'm just going to run through with you my thoughts on tone woods and strings and how you would pair them up, because just this week out of the blue I had several different inquiries about this, and it makes me think that sometimes, with the algorithms, some of the older videos that I've made that people have found useful have kind of disappeared down into the kind of depths of YouTube or the wider internet. So I'm just going to run through a couple of the basics, the things that I look for, and the mantra I use when I'm advising people in my day job at the Southern Ukulele Store about what to do. So I'm going to run through popular tone woods and I'm going to explain to you why you would use what for them. The four types of string: you have nylon, clear nylon, black nylon, Nile gut, which is more like nylon than Aquila want you to believe, and then fluorocarbon, which has less stretch. And you do get two different types of fluorocarbon. I'll run through them as we go. Maybe I should just say 5 types of string. But when you look at them in the context of pairing them with tone woods, you do get very different sounds and different things, and a lot of people hope that a good string is going to make up for something that's just there in the tone wood. So maybe by watching this video, and I'll try and keep it brief, that won't happen for you. So I'm going to run through the popular tone woods first. The first one we're going to talk about is mahogany. Mahogany is darker. Aesthetically, when you look at a mahogany instrument, it's normally a dark wood, and tonally it's a very similar kind of thing. If you hear people describe a ukulele as being soulful or rich, they're talking about those lower mid frequencies, the mid frequencies in general, and how they really stick out. So when you strum a chord, you hear more of that C string, or if you're playing low G, you hear more of that low G string. And what you can do is accentuate that or take some of that away. If you wanted to accentuate it, I recommend going for a black nylon string or one of the Aquila variants of Nile gut string, because they have a kind of honkiness, a warmth to them. They don't sustain for very long, but they do have hidden depths to them. So if you're that kind of player, you like to just strum for yourself at home and you want to keep it dark and Christmassy and warm and bluesy, then that's a really good choice. But if you do want to take some of that away, I recommend looking at a fluorocarbon string, whether it's clear or dark fluorocarbon. You're going to get more of a snap on the higher strings, and you're going to get more sustain as well. And I think that what the sustain does is it smooths out those darker frequencies, and you start to hear more of a kind of balanced sound across all of the strings. Second up, we're going to take a look at koa. Koa is the dream wood for many. It's probably the most associated wood with the ukulele. And if you want to know what koa sounds like, koa has more of that trebly frequencies at the tail end of the frequency curve. So when you hear a koa instrument, it sounds sweeter, it's got some kind of boisterous snap to it. But if you strum koa really, really hard, it's very easy to actually oversaturate, overcompress it and make it distort slightly. So really, if you're looking at koa instruments, be mindful that that's not necessarily the sound that your ears are expecting them to be. If you're somebody, you live in Hawaii, you want a Hawaiian made ukulele made of koa, I completely get that. If you're a performer, it might not be the most suitable wood, but string wise, what you would look at would be clear fluorocarbons to accentuate that Hawaiian sound, as well as traditional nylon strings, so clear nylon and black nylon. Black nylon, as used by Kamaka, create a slightly more restrained, slightly more mature sound. Clear nylon strings create that kind of, I think Jake Shimabukuro has a signature set of clear nylon D'Addario strings, for example, EJ65Ts, they're his string. Clear nylon will absorb some of the velocity when you play, but still bring out a sweet note. So if you imagine nylon is a stretchy material, so when you fret it and when you play into it, some of what's happening is being pulled in. Whereas if you were to look at fluorocarbon is harder, there is less stretch, so the notes ring out more like a piano. So with koa, you need to figure out whether you want those notes to ring out longer and perhaps be a bit barky, a bit too brittle if you play hard, or whether you want something a bit smoother to balance out the harshness of the koa. It's not every day someone calls koa harsh, is it? Yeah, like, you know what I mean. I hope I've helped there. Next up, we're going to talk about mango, which is a wood I have probably the most personal experience with. It's the wood that I've tried the most strings on. And the thing about mango is it has a slightly more prominent lower mid range. So the C string and the G string, they boom a bit more than they would on a koa instrument. I've talked about that more in depth in my ukulele tone woods video, but string wise, what you need to do is figure out what you're looking for. If you're a finger picker, I would recommend mango to you, because that C string has lots of sustain. It's not too kind of crisp or too dark when you play it. It's not flappy. It has some kind of life to it. And the options really, if you go for black nylon, you're going to find that you make that instrument as dark as it can be. It might not ring out like it should. I've recently been experimenting a lot with black nylon, and I think actually you'll find you get quite a nasty thwack with a lot of gloss mango instruments with black nylon. It's not a pairing I personally recommend unless you really want your mango uke to sound cheaper or like a Kamaka. Clear nylon is one of my favourite options because once again it absorbs your velocity when you play. So what you get is a smoother, rounder, mellower sound, which is what a lot of people are looking for from mango. When you think of mango, you're thinking kind of like the fruit bowl, you know, that pineapple sound. It's subconscious. We all think it when we think of mango. We want it to be a bit darker sounding, but what I like about clear nylon is that you get some kind of sizzle, you get some brightness from the treble strings, and I think you get a very good note separation. If you want to accentuate that more, then look at clear fluorocarbon. Clear fluorocarbon strings will give you less bass, more brightness, a slightly tauter experience when you play it, which will mean that you'll have more attack to your notes when you start playing. If you're a strummer and you play in a group and you want to be heard, clear fluorocarbon will be a good option with mango. If you want to find a level kind of middle ground, then darker fluorocarbon strings like the Worth Browns or the Fremont Black Lines, they give you a bit more of that. You still retain that darker C string and that low G if you play that way, but you can still find the note separation. Let's talk about spruce and cedar next. They are two different woods, but they share something in common. They're both the outsider's option. It's only in the last 10 years that you've seen lots and lots of choice with spruce and cedar ukuleles. Spruce and cedar have been used in the classical and flat top guitar industry for 100 years with good reason. They have a fantastic frequency response. Cedar is the more difficult, more nuanced wood of the two because cedar will pick up your mistakes more when you play. You have to be a really accurate player with cedar, otherwise you will find you'll hear sibilant noise or you'll hear fretting noise. It's, I think, being one of the softest wood options out there, it's just a little bit too responsive for most ukulele players, but if you gloss cedar and you have the right back and sides woods, then you can really do anything with it. Good example of that is Ukuleles Sus-T, which has the mahogany back and sides. So it really uses those mahogany back and sides to throw the noise out. The cedar top gives it the volume and the platform for which the back and sides woods can best work. So if you're going to be restringing and asking me which strings to use with your cedar top instrument, I'm going to ask you about the back and sides. And you need to just remember that cedar is responsive. It's loud, it's unapologetic. So if you're going to use clear fluorocarbon strings, you're going to get the most you can out of that. You'll find, I think, you can play quite hard on cedar without really finding any note distortion or that kind of nasty natural clipping noise that we hear. But you can go all the way over to black nylon and you can find something dark and rich, still with a lot of volume. If you want to hear cedar sound samples, I have done more than a dozen. There's a video that you'll be able to click on in the corner of the screen now that will show you all of my Ukuleles Sus-T sound samples from the last 2 years. Spruce is slightly different. Spruce is a bit more restrained and it retains a little bit more of the bass frequencies than cedar. A variation of spruce that you might be asking about is Port Orford cedar, which is actually more similar to spruce. It's not a type of cedar. It is a cypress wood, but it's it's more like spruce tonally. And spruce has lots of projection but retains bass better. So you can do the same kind of thing again. Clear fluorocarbon strings will give you more volume, but you're going to hear that bass. If you want to smooth that out, I would recommend clear nylon. If you want to accentuate the darker elements of the back and sides but with lots of volume, then black nylon and spruce work well for that. I've got two more to talk about. The first of which is Acacia. Acacia is very similar to Koa, but it's slightly earthier. It has slightly more kind of nasally, darker, honky frequencies to it. Only really when you compare them side by side. So Acacia is a fantastic wood to give you that tropical sound, a sweet sound, but with a kind of smoothed, natural bass end. When you hear really bright ukuleles being strummed, that can be Acacia. When you hear ukuleles being played, kind of finger picked, but they don't really kind of have a lot of expression, that's Acacia to my ear. If you want to get the most out of Acacia in terms of accentuating the wood type and keeping it sweet, once again, clear nylon is a good choice. Darker fluorocarbon strings are the most popular thing that people buy to go with Acacia ukuleles, because if you take Worth Browns being a very loud, slightly smoother string but with very little stretch, and then you put that on a wood that naturally has quite a lot of high frequencies but is not shrill or too harp-like, you find a middle ground. God, it's hard to explain. I just hope if you watch this video you've got something out of it. And finally, we're going to talk about maple, which is something that's being used more and more for ukuleles. Maple is an interesting wood because it absorbs the frequencies you give it, filters them, and then brings out a very level, very balanced and almost restrained sound at the end of it. If you want to get the most out of maple, I recommend going with clear nylon strings, because clear nylon strings do the exact same thing. And what you end up with is a ukulele that has lots of dynamic range. It's not the loudest ukulele in the bunch, but it's clean and it's clear, and you can really emote with your playing on it with clear nylon strings. If you go for black nylon strings, I have found that it can be a bit too much. So black nylon strings can take away some of the volume on an instrument that's already a tiny bit quieter. Nile gut is another good option, although I do find myself that Nile gut sounds a bit more plasticky than clear nylon because it has a slightly harder texture to it. So when you fret it, it's spongy and absorbent, but not quite as absorbent. It's like it has a shell around it when you fret it. And then finally you have clear fluorocarbon, which will give you a bit more volume, a bit more vibrancy and a bit more snap, that tauter sound that we've talked about before, but not necessarily that much more volume. So clear fluorocarbon is a solid choice, but you're not really pairing it with the wood. It's a little bit like pairing, cheese and wine. There are certain combinations that just have a more natural ebb and flow to them. Anyway, look, I'm boring myself. I don't know why I make these videos half the time, but if you have enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe and comment and let me know your thoughts on strings. Even if you disagree with me, I do love a good debate. I like debating these things, so don't be panicked if I reply and say, oh, I like your opinion. I mean, I don't agree with it, because that's what this is all about. Anyway, be kind, have a great Christmas, and I'll see you soon.